I recently did a video about how the patriarchy may have enhanced the sexual dimorphism amongst humans. To my surprise, it had really great engagement, and I would like to take this video to answer some of the common questions that I found on it. As far as I know, this hypothesis that women being fed less than men led to more sexual dimorphism amongst humans comes from Priscille Touraille. Here's an example of a paper she wrote about this topic. This, however, has been gaining traction, and you can also find other articles such as this one that were written by other researchers and are more likely to be in English about this topic. Specifically, the research that is covered in this article compared the bone differences between remains from the Neolithic in the south of Europe and in the north of Europe, and there were very big differences in the sexual dimorphism that was about 5% in the south of Europe and 18% in the north of Europe. They also found that the DNA of Southern European versus Northern European in the Neolithic era was very similar and therefore could not explain such a large difference in sexual dimorphism between the two populations. Their conclusion was therefore that it must have been some kind of environmental factor, and the most likely environmental factor was different access to food. This other article that was very recently published on the 11th of December 2023 also found that sociocultural practices may have affected sex differences in early Neolithic Europe. Again, pointing to the fact that sexual dimorphism was very small originally prior to the patriarchy, and in the early days of the patriarchy, those sexual differences increased significantly. I've also had a lot of questions about how do we know when the patriarchy started, how can we pinpoint it? As far as I'm aware, it seems largely accepted that European patriarchy started around 6,000 to 8,000 years ago in Mesopotamia with the beginning of agriculture. If you're interested by the topic, you can read this article. It's not a research paper, it's a blog post, but it does cite a lot of research on the topic that you can then find if you want to dig further. As to why the patriarchy started when agriculture started appearing, it seems to be because as humans started to own land and to have possessions that were significant, it became important to guarantee inheritance. Therefore, we started to have marriages and the importance of being faithful to your husband so that we could guarantee who the father of the children was, so that the inheritance could be appropriately given to the right heir. We also have evidence that prior to that, particularly in hunter-gatherer societies, there wasn't a significant patriarchal structure. It seems it may have even been matrilineal and matriarchal. This paper, for example, if you want to read it, shows that actually it's possible the majority of hunters were actually women. Now, if we follow the logic that patriarchal societies have driven the rise in sexual dimorphism, it would be logical that more egalitarian societies would also have less sexual dimorphism, and that's something that this paper explores and actually shows that more egalitarian societies seem to have less sexual dimorphism and were correlated with a decline in sexual dimorphism amongst humans. Finally, another source that I used in the previous video is this one. You can also find the research paper associated with it in the Time article. Unfortunately, it is difficult to link external websites on TikTok, so I'm sorry I can't give you the exact link, but hopefully if you search the title, you should find it. The last thing I would like to stress is that this is a hypothesis on the potential link between the patriarchy and increased sexual dimorphism amongst humans. It is not definitive. There is still more research that needs to be done, and there is no consensus amongst the researchers in the topic.